Thank you for Patreon now for donating to the Patreon.
Hey guys, it's Vandy. We're back in another Card Fight Vanguard deck profiles. If you guys enjoyed, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and donate to Patreon. And let's get started. Today we have Keter Sanctuary, Hexaorb. So, Hexaorb in set 4 definitely had my least favorite cards that came out of it, and maybe not a lot of cards to begin with that come out of it for support, but it actually came out with some pretty good cards. Like, there's this really good grade 2 that I love that has done everything but that has blessed this deck completely, and then there's this grade 3 that I really love the skill of, but I never pull off because I literally forget its wording halfway through the skill. So let's go ahead and get this deck before I started, and then you can see how good or bad this thing may have turned out. But I do definitely think at the climax point of Season 4, I think Hexaorb has gotten better, and it just got shit representation in the match against Gravidia. First up, our starter today is Connect Sorceress. Grade 0 boost, 5k shield, 6k base, auto when short upon if you win second, draw a card. There's no real reason to run this as your starter. I mean, 1, you don't need this as your starter. 2, you don't really need the grade 1 of the ride line either. Only the grade 2 and grade 3 typically matter, but I still run this as the starter because, if you're going to have 2 of them, you might as well have the other 2. So Connect Sorceress is the way to go, and I like it for it as the standard draw. Trigger-wise, we run one over trigger in Light Dragon Deity of Honors, Amartinoa. Grade 0 boost, 50k shield, 5k base. Over trigger, you only have one over trigger in your deck, and when revealed as a trigger, move that card, draw a card, choose one of your units. It gets plus 1 million for the turn, and if revealed during your drive check, activate additional effect, which is until end of turn, you can perform drive checks for the battle your rear guard's attacked. Okay, that's mouthful. Anyways, okay, you get the mill, you get a draw. And typically when I play this deck, I typically have like 2 grade 3s in the front row half the time, so possibly 6 drives. That's pretty good, especially because Hexaorb gets effects that activate from your drive checks. Now, my thing is Obari better than this? Okay, because we're assuming the fact that no matter what, this is the over trigger that you would check regardless. I do think Amartinoa is better, even if it only is like an extra 2 drives that turn, because maybe you just have 2 grade 2s. It's still extra drives, which can give a lot of power to the rear guard that you don't give the 1 million to, and Hexaorb literally gives 20 to any trigger, basically. So, I do prefer this one. Does that mean Obari's not useful? No. It means, your units get plus 1 million, but I do think our Amartinoa is better because it can also fill up your hand cards quicker, but if you want to go Obari, go with Obari. And then our normal triggers are 3 fronts in White Crow Sorcerer Taxus, 4 fronts in Bard of Heavenly Song Alpacc, grade 0 boost, 15k shield, 4k base, continues guard circle of your opponent's vanguard to grade 3 grade, gets plus 5k shield. Blade Feather Dragon has a crit at 4, grade 0 boost, 15k shield, 4k base, auto rear at the end of the battle, let it boost, shove it to soul, choose one of your gets plus 2 for the turn, and a heal trigger in Circuling Sorceress. So, we run 7 fronts. We do not need draws in this deck. Okay, well, maybe we do, and that would make this deck slightly more consistent, but you want the more fronts because Hexaorb does require fronts for her skill, so does one of the supporting grade 3s, and same for crits. So you do want to have those at a bigger number. Fronts are better to have as a bigger number because while you're also giving plus 10 from drive check and your trigger due to Hexaorb skill, you're also just giving plus 10 to everyone in your front row, making them hit stronger, which is why I think Hexaorb definitely, Hexaorb seeing one trigger basically brings 1 unit into the numbers of a Bastion swing without the inherent 40k swings, probably somewhere in the 30 if you try. So I do like the extra fronts. If you want to run draws or crits over the extra fronts, I'd say it's fine, but I do prefer 7 fronts and 4 crit. Grade 1s, 4 copies of Diaglass Sorceress. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base. Auto when it's placed on rear from hand. If your vanguard is Hexaorb or Pentagleam, counterblast 1 and discard a card. Look at top 2, choose up to 2 unit cards from among them, call them to rear guard circle, and put the rest on the top of the deck in any order. So, counterblasting 1, discarding 1. I don't ever mind the counterblast, especially in this deck, because for some reason I've had less of a counterblast issue so far. But my main issue with this is the discard, because literally every time I'm forced to use this, I have to discard something I don't want to discard. So, that's not okay, but, you get a top 2 look, and you either call them or you keep them on top. The downside to this is they're stuck where they are, so half the time I use this, I see 2 attackers, 2 grade 2s, and I already have a grade 2 in my front row by the time I use this, so this is essentially one of them's going to the back row for boost, but it's not really going to do anything. So Diaglass Sorcerer can help you increase the chance of you seeing a trigger and also make you aware of your drive checks. Downside is, at least with my luck, she only ever gives me 1 unit that will actually be useful that turn, and the other unit is typically just kill fodder if they're a field nuker deck. So 4 of Diaglass, because she can help set up your drive checks and help get you aboard without hopefully having to fuck over your drive check. But in the chance that she makes you lose triggers, it's how the game works, and you probably should have used a deck stacking skill first. 4 4 of our PG and Aegismare Dragon, grade 1, boost, 0 shield, 6k base, continue Sentinel, you have 4 Sentinels on your deck, and auto is split on guard circle. Choose one of your units, it cannot be a ton to battle, and if your hand has 2 or more cards, choose a card from your hand and discard it. So standard PG, nothing too special about it. If you don't know what that means when this card is placed on guard circle, if this and only one other card were in your hand at that time, you do not have to discard a card for it, which is really nice. So you can be as aggressive as you want and still be able to defend, especially in this deck where if you're trying to spam Diaglass, you will end up going to that point where you will need this to work. But typically I never really have problems with this deck in terms of hand cards, but the PG does come help in the occasions where we're getting into the late game and both decks are probably hit for big numbers enough to where their hands are starting to get really low. So 4 of Aegismare, because it can help you in the late game, especially in this deck. And then our last grade 1 is the grade 1 in the ride deck. 0 copies in the main deck, 1 copy in the ride deck of Tier Square Sorceress. Grade 1 boost, 5k shield, 8k base. Auto when is rode upon by Pentagleam Sorceress. Counter boss 1, draw a card. Okay, they stole that straight from Circle Magus and they changed the wording to where it specifies that it has to be a certain unit. Unlike Circle Magus, who's just when it was rode upon, counter boss 1, draw a card. Why they had to make this worse, I have no idea, but okay, apparently this would have been too good for if it wasn't like that. And auto rear, once per turn, when your draft check reveals a trigger unit, counterboss 1, choose one of your opponent's remote rear guards and put it to bottom. Yeah, no. Just no. I mean, yeah, this can get rid of very certain pesky cards, but no, it's not really that good, especially when like the grade 3 support card we have can do this but better. So 1 of in the ride deck, and if you somehow are able to call this from soul, do it, I guess, but not worth it. Just keep it in the soul and keep it in the ride deck at 1. Grade 2 time, 4 copies of Exquisite Knight Olwein. Grade 2 intercept, 5k shield, 10k base. I really love this card. We all know it's a gold. It's in my book of favorites, and then it has that nice cape. It has the desert feel. I don't know why, but I was just playing in a Zoom 11. Or watching someone play in a Zoom 11. I was watching the Saudi Arabia match. I don't know why, and it just struck me for the sand again. So I really like this card. Anyways, auto was put on rear guard. If your vanguard is Hexaorb Sorceress, soul boss 1 and look at the top 2. Choose up to 2 cards from one of them, put them at the top of the deck in any order, and send the rest to bottom. So similar to Diaglass, except Diaglass calls them. This one just puts them back at top or bottom. And auto rear, when your draft reveals a trigger unit, counter boss 1, this unit gets plus 10 for the turn. Okay. Counterblast sometimes becomes an issue with this deck if you are choosing to use every ability at its instance that you can use it, but that's still pretty good as a trigger combined with Hexaorb. If you put them all on this thing and you use its skill, that's a plus 30 from a single trigger, which is pretty good. So 40k, which is nice, and that on-place ability is really easy to pull off. This deck doesn't really have much of a soul problem. You get to look at the top 2, and you could either send them both back to top, send them both to bottom, or do 1 on top, 1 on bottom. Either way, Olwein's really good, and I like it, so I run it at 4. And then our last grade 2 that isn't in the ride deck, 4 copies of Desire Magic and Esnono. This thing is quite literally the reason why this deck is so fun to play. Grade 2 intercept, 5k shield, 10k base, auto rear once per turn. When this unit attacks into anything, if your vanguard is a Hexaorb Sorceress or Pentagleam Sorceress, discard a card from your hand, look at top 2, choose up to 2 cards from on them, put the top of the deck in any order, and put the rest on the bottom, and this unit gets plus 10 for the turn. So almost the same skill as Olwein, except it can work while you're at grade 2. It is not a soul boss, it is just a discard, which once more sometimes it's very risky with that discard ability. But at the same time, regardless of where you put them, afterwards, this thing gets plus 10 for the turn. And there is a way to restand rear guards, or specifically grade 2 or less, at the end of the battle that your vanguard attacked. So Esnono is a pretty good card, as it can stack your drive checks, it can get power, and then you can restand it after you get a lot of your stacked drive checks with at least a 20k base on it. Esnono is a really good grade 2, and I like it because it costs no counterblast, costs no soul blast, only costs a single discard. It may be a once per turn, but I'm fine that it being a once per turn, and can help the deck out a lot, and I give it a 4 of. I'm really, considering the fact that this thing is a rare, no, it's a common, this thing should be cheap, but I don't know how the market's going to work with that, 4 of. And then our last grade 2 is our grade 2 in the ride deck, no copies in the main deck, of Pentagleam Sorceress. Grade 2 intercept, 5k shield, 10k base, auto when it's rode upon by Hexaorb Sorceress, look at top 3, put them at the top of the deck in any order. So unlike the other 2 cards, unlike these 2 that could stack the deck, this one requires you to put them all back at top, but hey, at least you look at one more card and you do it for free, and you get to switch the order around, which is pretty nice. And auto when it's placed on rear guard, look at the top card of your deck and put it at the top or bottom. If you put it on the bottom, it gets plus 2 for the turn. Okay, back before things like this and this were revealed, this would be valid to run in the main deck just because it gave you an extra top look, but no, not really. It's now just ride deck fodder because, hey, at least its grade 2 skill is free and it's a free top 3 switch. So I do give Pentagloom that. She has one of my favorite ride line skills in terms of the second skill, as more of it gets 2k averagely, which technically makes it worse because it's an on place for that 2k. It was more interesting, so I give it that. 1 copy in the ride deck, no copies in the main deck because you don't really need it in the main deck, but if you wanted to, because maybe you want to look at more cards more for a free cost, run her at a 2 of in the main deck if you want to. Grade 3 time. 3 copies of Octadevote Sorceress. Grade 3 Twin Jet Persona Ride, 13k base, auto rear. When your Dread Checker goes a trigger unit, if your Vanguard is a Hexaorb Sorceress, retire this unit, do countercharge 1 or soul charge 1. So unfortunately you don't get both, which means you can spam Hexaorb less, unfortunately. But it's really easy to see a trigger in this deck, and Diaglass seems to have a thing with this card where every time I use Diaglass, this is among the top 2. So it's a really easy call to the back row, sack a trigger, kill this to get a counter charge off of the counterblast that I paid for Diaglass. So, or just soul charge if you really need that soul charge. So, all around Octadevote's really good and very easy way to get counter blast or soul blast back. The downside is she requires you to pull a trigger, so if you're getting really unlucky and none of your triggers are showing up in the top 2, then okay, that's a problem, but the chances of that occurring is very doubtful. So 3 copies of Octadevote. 3 copies of Knight of Damage Fosado. Yes, I still run him because, yes, he's still good. Grade 3 200 Persona Ride, 13k base. Continuous rear. This unit cannot be chosen by your opponent's card effects. And auto rear when this unit attack hits anything. Counter charge 1 and soul charge 1. You know what's here. On hit pressure, Hexaorb combined with any trigger makes it a 20k plus to whatever unit you want to do. You give that 20k to this thing. 33k swing while your opponent's at grade 2. Get a counter charge and a soul charge out of it. All around, really good grade 3. Adds on hit pressure. Is something pesky that they might want to kill quickly because of the amount of resources it can allow you to keep. 3 of, because they also can't kill VFX, so they actually have to waste an attack on it. So unless they're a deck that can constantly restand, it is a 3 of, and only Flagbird could probably do that. And then our last supporting grade 3, before we get on to Hexaorb, is 3 copies of Twin Chain Great Magic Totone. Grade 3 200 Persona Ride, 13k base, auto rear. At the end of the battle that your unit attacked, counterboss will perform all effects below according to the number of according to the triggers revealed for the drive check of that battle. Yeah, for the record, if you can't tell, it says unit, so it's implying that you can use it with the over trigger. I mean, most of the time it is going to happen with the Vanguard, but if you do see the over trigger, you could just choose not to use it on your Vanguard attack and then just use it on your rearguard attack. So then again, it's not once per turn, so I don't know why you would do it that way, but sure. Anyways, if you drive check a crit, choose one of your opponent's rearguards and put it to the bottom, and if you drive check a front, choose one of your grade 2 or less and stand it. So, I'm pretty sure you can't just see 2 fronts and stand 2 units. I don't think that would happen. If it is, then someone inform me about that, but I'm pretty sure it's not. So, really nice way to get an extra 4th attack in a Hexaorb deck, especially because you can combine it with Olwein. Granted, it would involve you, or this thing, actually. No, it would most likely be this thing. 20 plus at least 1 front, which applies that this would probably be at a 40. And if Persona Ride was involved, 50, which is a pretty good number for a restand. And it's only cost of a counterblast, and the best part is, it's not once per turn. So if you drive tech your over trigger, if you have a grade 2 on board, that grade 2 is going to do a lot of restanding that turn if you're going to keep sacking fronts. I'm going to tell you that much. So, Totone, really good grade 3. 3 of, because restands and sending units to bottom is really good, especially when it's only for the cost of a counterblast, and over triggers can break this. And then our last normal unit in the deck is, unit in general, is our main grade 3 Hexaorb Sorceress. Grade 3 200 Persona Ride, 13k base, 3 copies in the main deck, 1 copy in the ride deck. Auto ban when your drive check reveals a trigger unit, choose one of your rear guards and it gets plus 10 for the turn. So you cannot pick itself, but the funny thing is, because of how boosting works, you could just boost Hexaorb with a unit, they guard for a 2 to pass, get a trigger, skill of Hexaorb, give the power to the unit that's boosting it. Well, now it's not a 2 to pass because then you can just give the power from the trigger to Vanguard and it breaks through because the power from the boost would have passed over. Yeah, so Hexaorb is a card that you can't really 2 to pass. Any 1 and 2 to pass are basically the same thing if we're considering 1 trigger, but that's pretty good. And then act Vanguard once per turn. If you Persona Road this turn, counterblast 1 and Soul Blast 1, reveal up to 1 critical or front trigger from your hand and put it at the top of your deck, and this unit gets a drive for the turn. So you do have to pay the counterblast or Soul Blast to do that, and unfortunately you have to Persona Ride for it. But you do not have to send a crit or a front to top to get triple drive. You get the triple drive regardless, as long as you paid the cost for it, which is pretty nice. And there is a card that can make it easier for you to search a Persona Ride, because there's literally just a card that says if your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, or if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, Counterboss 1 search deck for a Hexaorb and add it to hand. I don't like that card, just because like I already have somebody of a Counterboss problem, and I don't want to add it in because it will add to said problem, especially because like there wouldn't be a point in adding a Persona Ride that wouldn't do anything besides give me plus 10 to front row when I could just kind of wait it out and I draw my Persona Rides decently enough to where I don't really need to rely on that. So 3 of Hexaorb Sorceress, because you know, you want those Persona Rides for your first skill to go up. But yeah, even if you don't Persona Ride, this thing's genuinely deadly. Like, you pull a double trigger while your opponent's at 4 damage, they will most likely either die or they will drop 2 PGs to survive, especially if one of said triggers was a crit. So 3 copies of Hexaorb in the main deck for those Persona Rides, and then 1 copy in the right deck because you know it's your main grade 3, and it's a really good main grade 3. And then our last card in the deck is 2 copies of our normal order, Wish to Tomorrow. Grade 3, normal order, play it by counterblasting 1 and soul blasting 1 and revealing a crit or front trigger from your hand. If your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you draw a card and you put the reveal card at the top of your deck. So, same cost as Hexaorb, does not require a Persona Ride though, but you do have to put a front or crit to the top. Good news is though, you get an extra draw out of that, so you know, you do combine with Hexaorb, granted it's a counterblast 2 and a soul blast of 2 for it. You essentially get, assuming that you did actually have 2 fronts and 2 crits in your hand, you basically guarantee your next 2 drive checks to be at least 2 triggers, followed by you got an extra hand card out of it. So Wish to Tomorrow can be definitely really good in a Hexaorb deck. Funny thing is you can put this in a non-Hexaorb deck and it would still be pretty good, but yeah, I'll prefer a Hexaorb deck. Also, what the hell is this? What unit is this? Is this a unit and I'm just not realizing it, or is this a new unit that I hope gets printed? Because it looks really good and I really want this to be a main grade 3, or at least a good grade 2. So yeah, Wish to Tomorrow is really good in combos for setting up Hexaorb. Just don't mess it up by doing something like Olwein, stack a trigger on top, or stack a trigger on top, and then using this to proceed to draw said trigger. But yeah, Wish to Tomorrow is really good as long as you don't fuck it up. 2 copies. And that's it for the deck, so hope you guys enjoyed. All around, it is a fun-ish deck to play. I definitely say sets 1 and 2 were not my favorites. I only liked it because of Olwein. Set 1, I didn't want to play it at all, but I played it for the sake of testing. Set 3, okay, I liked Wish to Tomorrow. I don't remember if Wish to Tomorrow came out in set 3, but I did run it in set 3, and it was very fun. And set 4, that's when I think I started enjoying this, because, you know, we have this thing who can restand, and we have this thing who basically is the best grade 2 in this deck. Sorry, Olwein, but as much as I would love to bias you to victory, I have to admit this one is better than you. So yeah, all around this deck is good. It gets a good amount of power really quickly. In fact, it can probably hit high numbers very quickly. It's one of the decks that, it's like Bastion basically, but we're Bastion trial deck somewhat. But it can also just be very dangerous if you need it to be, and it's a really good defensive deck-ish. Sometimes it's defensive, sometimes it's not, depending on how you play it. So all around, I like this deck. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, donate to the Patreon, join Discord, follow Twitch, and I'll see you on the next one. Don't forget to stand up your Vanguards.